Hey friends, you got Renee Rivera here at Mold Mending. Today I'm going to share with you a recipe of a craft, actually a salt dough recipe. And what you can do with that salt dough is actually make ornaments, you can make little figurines, you could make gifts out of it. So I chose to do this as a craft with my grandkids, thinking, ooh, maybe we could make some gifts for Christmas. That's why I've got some Christmas colors on today, but this is actually a recipe of something you can do at any time, and it's a way that you can avoid using clay or Play-Dohs or the regular salt dough recipe that has gluten in it. Why do I say that? Because some of us have to do everything gluten-free, including our crafts, including our doughs and our Play-Dohs, and even our salt dough needs to be gluten-free. The reason being is because those folks who have a gluten intolerance or who have celiacs, they can't touch this. They cannot touch all-purpose flour. They cannot touch gluten. The other thing is when you are pouring a flour into a bowl, that's creating like this dust. It's creating air particles, and that we can then be breathing in and also be getting an allergic reaction from that, especially if you're a person with celiacs, and you have to be avoiding gluten at all costs. Even breathing it in can be a very negative effect to your body, a pretty bad one. To the point of I can't even go into certain pizza shops anymore because that gluten is so in the air that it even it congests my breathing. It makes it difficult, makes my throat scratchy, clogs my throat up. So the gluten's not something fun to deal with for some of us that have an intolerance to it or an allergy to it. So gluten-free salt dough. It's fun. It's pretty cheap. It's not as cheap as the one that's non-gluten-free, but you can still find it cheap. So I went to the store trying to figure out what kind of flour could I find that is cheap enough, gluten-free, still do the job, and the dough would still turn out. And what I found was a Bob's Red Mill gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour. I'll show you the packaging here. It's a little light blue package with some red and blue and yellow writing on it, but it's a gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour, and it says make your recipes gluten-free, and that's what we're doing. We're going to make this craft gluten-free. So you will actually need flour as one of the things, you will need table salt as your second thing, and you will need water as your last ingredient. Now optional is food coloring. If you want to color your items from the get-go, use food coloring. Just keep in mind that the yellow and the red, some people can have allergies too, so you want to make sure you know that before serving that dough off to somebody else. Okay, so how much do you need? For a basic recipe, it's the same as a regular gluten salt dough, and the basic recipe is 1 cup of flour. Put that in your bowl. And then you would measure a 1/2 cup of table salt, put it in the bowl. And then you would do water. You will want 1 cup of water. No, don't do your bottled water. Use your tap water. Nobody's eating this stuff. I hope nobody's eating it. It's a lot of salt. So a cup of water plus a tablespoon. So 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon of warm water. Put all that in a bowl, mix it up. So what you do is larger bowl, at least for me with 2 grandbabies, I took a larger bowl, put all the ingredients in here, and let them stir it. I let them start with a whisk, you know, teaching them some tools that are in the kitchen, the whisk and the spatula. And then when it became too hard, I then said, okay, let's use our fingers. And then we just used our fingers and kneaded the dough. The original round of it, we took turns kneading it with our fingers, and when it was a dough, split it in half, and then they each had their own, and then they worked at it harder. It was a nice little workout for them. And then once that dough is made really well, you can then roll it out. And I don't have a rolling pin, so I just used a cup and a jar and I let them take their dough, put it on a cookie sheet, I mean the cookie sheet that we ended up baking it on was the same cookie sheet that I let them roll their dough in. So they each got a big cookie sheet, threw their dough on that, gave them a big canning jar, and said just roll it out, roll it out. And of course we used this flour. We powdered the pan first, the bottom of the pan. We powdered it with flour, and then I showed them how to powder their hands a little bit with the flour and even powder their jar, and then how to roll that. Once they got it flat, I said, okay, now we're going to cut it into shapes. So first is you just make the dough. Second, you make what you want. You know, if you want to make a snowman, make it into nice big pieces. You want to make little ornaments or whatever, you cut it. Now I did not have, since we had to leave everything and start over, even our kitchen, because of black mold, I have not repurchased a lot of cookie cutters. So I was like, okay, I got to get creative here. What can we use that creates texture or makes shapes and sizes? And so I've got this salt shaker. I took the top off and let them use the top of the salt shaker to cut circles. So we did a lot of circle cutting. The other thing is for textures, like what could they use to make marks? So I used a tenderizer, let them use that. They love this, you know, because it included beating and hammering. So let them use that. Even let them use forks and just any gadget that I already had in the kitchen that I thought, or special lids, just let them use that and press into it. And once they're done cutting and shaping what you want to have shaped, you need to have your oven on to 200 degrees. And you're going to bake, a lot of the recipes tell you for 2 hours. I'm going to tell you, don't listen, okay? This actually took us 4 hours. That had to stay in the oven at 200 degrees. Ours took 4 hours, not the typical 2 hours that you see online. Okay, that's all a bunch of bogus. So once it's in there, it's dry. You know it's dry when it's hard and you can't like press something through it like a biscuit, you know, or like a cookie. You want it to be nice and hard. You bring it out, let it cool a little bit, and then lay it out and paint it. And so we ended up taking ours outside. I let them sit out in the grass, and we had a heyday. And they decided that they didn't want to paint. They didn't want to cut all of theirs apart. So one of my grandsons kept theirs like this, and a big shape. Let it cook in this huge shape. It's like the size, it's bigger than my hand. And they poked it with some holes, some kind of square. So I'm not sure what they used to do that, but I'm going to show you here. They've got a bunch of rectangles poked through it. It almost looks like the shape of a continent. So one of them did this. And then and also the paint job has yellow at the bottom, all sorts of colors. Yellow, red, blue, pink. They had a heyday. And then my other grandson, you could tell they used the tenderizer really well on this one. And they've got painting. It almost looks like a fish. It kind of got some blue on there, some orange, pink, and brown, and yellow. And they just painted at that as well. So they both made some unique things. And I then cut out the circles. I did a bunch of cut circles. Oh, here's a little one that looks like a cookie with some pink frosting on it. I just cut a bunch of circles for them. Attempted to make a snowman. That failed. But the idea is you can paint on them, and that's what we did. You could spray paint them. You could add glitter. We have some glitter here. Anyway, and then we poked holes on them. We thought if these circles turned out well, I was thinking of putting people's initials on it and such. So I poked a little hole with a toothpick through the top of all the holes, but I'm not turning these into alphabet ornaments. Anyway, when you're done painting them and it's drying, you can actually then varnish it. You can get a clear glaze spray. You could use any kind of Mod Podge, but do not use any kind of polyurethane because it turns yellow over time. And if you choose to store these once they're done or when the season's over, it's suggested to avoid heat, humidity, and moisture, and it stores best in between wax paper in case, you know, your storage gets hot. You don't want them sticking together. The other thing is salt acts as a preservative, so yay salt for that. But this is just one little activity we did, and it was gluten-free, it was fun. And I now know it works and wanted to just pass it on to you. I would love to know what crafts you guys are doing that are gluten-free and that are hands-on. That maybe it's something that I could try with my grandkids or even try myself. I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, remember, we can be well even while ill and have fun for the holidays or whenever. Take care.